It was past midnight. Beneath the city, hidden from the world above, an illegal fight arena was alive with chaos. The air was thick sweat, blood, and money all mixed together. A steel cage stood at the center, surrounded by a screaming crowd. Some were placing bets, others were just there to watch someone fall. Inside the cage, two fighters clashed like animals. Every punch echoed. Every hit felt brutal. One man staggered backward, his face already covered in blood. The other didn't stop, rushed forward and delivered one final crushing blow. The body hit the ground. Hard. For a split second, silence. Then the arena exploded. The referee stepped in, raising his hand. "Fight's over." But the noise didn't die down, it only grew louder. Because everyone knew this wasn't the main event. A tall announcer in a black suit stepped forward, a smirk on his face as he grabbed the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice boomed across the arena, "get ready for something unexpected." The lights dimmed slightly. A pause, just enough to build tension. And now, our next challenger. The crowd leaned in. An unknown fighter. Confusion spread instantly. Murmurs turned into laughter. "Unknown?" someone shouted. "Is this a joke?" Then, the gate opened. A man walked in slowly. No flashy entrance. No music. No hype. Just calm, controlled steps. It was Bruce Lee. Wearing a simple black t-shirt and jeans, he didn't look like a fighter stepping into a brutal underground arena. He looked ordinary, too ordinary. The crowd wasn't impressed. "Who is this guy? He's dead in seconds." Easy money. Even the fighters watching from the sidelines smirked. But Bruce didn't react. His face was still, his eyes focused. He stepped into the cage and stopped at the center. Silence didn't fall because the crowd respected him. It fell because something about him felt different. The announcer leaned closer to the mic, lowering his voice just enough to pull everyone in. No record, no reputation, no fear. A beat. "But what you're about to witness doesn't make sense." Bruce slowly raised his head. His eyes locked forward, not in the crowd, not on the lights, on his opponent. And in that moment, something shifted. Because he wasn't here for fame. He wasn't here for glory. He wasn't even here to prove anything. He was here for a reason no one in that arena could understand. He didn't step into that cage to win. He stepped into it to save a life. Just a few nights before that fight, the city looked very different. No roaring crowds, no flashing lights, just quiet streets and people trying to survive. On the edge of a worn-down neighborhood, there was a small, crumbling apartment. The paint was peeling, the windows were cracked, and inside, a family was holding on by a thread. A father lay on a weak, creaking bed. His breathing was uneven. Every inhale sounded like a struggle, every exhale like it might be his last. A persistent illness had taken over his body, slow, unforgiving. He hadn't worked in months. Medical bills had piled up, stacking higher than anything the family could handle. Beside him sat his wife, exhausted, sleepless, but still trying to stay strong. She held a damp cloth against his forehead, whispering soft reassurances she wasn't even sure she believed anymore. In the corner of the room, a young boy sat quietly. No toys, no laughter. Just silence. He watched everything, too young to fully understand but old enough to feel the fear. Every knock on the door made him flinch. And that fear wasn't without reason. Because earlier that same day, there had been a knock. But it didn't help. It was a warning. 3 men stood outside the apartment, well-dressed, cold-eyed, and completely emotionless. They didn't shout. They didn't need to. One of them stepped forward, speaking calmly, almost politely. "Time's up." The mother froze. Her hands tightened around the edge of the door. "Please, just a little more time," she said, her voice trembling. "My husband is sick. We're trying." The man didn't let her finish. "You've had time." His tone didn't change. That made it worse. "You borrowed money. You knew the terms." A pause. Then he leaned in slightly. 3 days. The words hit harder than any threat. "If we don't get what we're owed, you don't keep the apartment." His eyes shifted past her, briefly scanning the inside. "And maybe you don't keep anything else either." The message was clear. No more chances. No more excuses. Just a deadline. The door slowly closed, but the fear stayed inside. That night the mother didn't sleep. She counted every possible option and found none. Sell something? There was nothing left. Ask for help? No one would give it. Pray? She already had. And still, nothing changed. The next morning she stepped outside, hoping somehow that something would be different. That's when she saw him. Bruce Lee was standing across the street. Not as a fighter. Not as a legend. Juste among, observing. His eyes weren't wandering. They were fixed on the apartment, on the cracked windows, on the silence inside. He had seen the men leave the night before. He had heard enough. Slowly he walked closer. The mother noticed him, hesitant at first. Strangers weren't something she trusted anymore. Can I help you? She asked cautiously. Bruce didn't answer immediately. His gaze shifted past her toward the room behind her, toward the man lying on the bed, toward the boy sitting quietly in the corner. He didn't need an explanation. He understood. What happened? He asked calmly. At first she said nothing, but something about his voice made it hard to lie. So she told him about the debt, about the illness, about the 3 days, and when she finished, there was no anger in her voice, just defeat. Bruce stood there in silence, not shocked, not confused, just thinking, because he had seen this before. Different people, same situation. Power used against the weak, time running out for those who had nothing left to give. He looked at the father again, then at the child. The boy quickly looked away, pretending not to stare, but the fear in his eyes was impossible to hide. That was the moment something shifted. Not outside, inside Bruce. He exhaled slowly. How much? He asked. The mother hesitated, then gave him the number. It wasn't small. It wasn't something anyone could just offer. For a brief moment, silence filled the space again, because both of them knew there was no easy solution. Bruce nodded once, not in agreement. Indecision. He'll handle it, he said. The mother frowned slightly, confused. Yo! Bruce didn't explain, because the answer wasn't something she would expect. He turned and began to walk away. Wait, she called out. Why would you do this? Bruce stopped, just for a second. Without turning around, he gave a quiet reply. A pause. No one will. And with that, he kept walking. Back toward the part of the city most people avoided. Back toward the underground. Back toward the fight. Because in that moment, one truth had already settled in his mind: if he didn't step into that cage, that family wouldn't survive. The cage door slammed shut. A sharp metallic echo rang through the arena, and just like that, there was no way out. Across the cage, Bruce Lee stood still, calm, composed, almost detached from the chaos around him. But the man standing opposite him was something else entirely. He was massive, towering over Bruce, built like a wall of muscle. His presence alone was enough to silence doubts, at least for everyone except Bruce. Scars ran across his face and shoulders, each one telling a story of fights he had survived, and opponents who hadn't. The announcer's voice cut through the noise. Undefeated. 23 fights, 23 wins. The crowd erupted. They knew this man. They feared him. And now, they were watching someone completely unknown step into his world. Laughter broke out from different corners of the arena. This won't last 10 seconds. He's done. Easy money. Bets shifted instantly, every own putting their money against Bruce. The opponent cracked his neck, rolling his shoulders as he stared directly at Bruce. You don't belong here, he muttered, his voice low but heavy. Bruce didn't respond, didn't move, didn't even blink. That silence irritated him. The referee stepped between them, raising his hand. Fight! It started instantly. No hesitation. The giant lunged forward with explosive force, throwing a brutal right hook aimed straight at Bruce's head. Fast, heavy, lethal. But Bruce moved. Just enough. The punch sliced through the air where his face had been a split second earlier. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The opponent didn't slow down. Another punch. Then another. Each one thrown with raw power, each one capable of ending the fight instantly. Bruce stayed defensive, light on his feet, precise, focused. He dodged. He shifted. He absorbed the rhythm. But he didn't attack. And the crowd noticed. Fight back! Someone shouted. What is he doing? He's scared. The opponent smirked, gaining confidence with every second. To him, This wasn't a fight, it was a chase. And sooner or later, he always caught his prey. He feinted left, then stepped in with a crushing body shot. This time, it landed, a deep, heavy impact. The sound echoed through the cage. Bruce's body shifted slightly from the force. A collective gasp filled the arena. That was the first clean hit, and it changed everything. The opponent saw it too. A flicker of satisfaction crossed his face. "You're finished," he said under his breath. The attacks became more aggressive, more violent, punch after punch forcing Bruce backward. For the first time, he was on the defensive edge. Another hit grazed his shoulder. Another clipped his side. Not full damage but enough to show vulnerability, and that's all the crowd needed. The noise turned louder, mocking. "Certain. He's done. Just end it." Bruce's breathing slowed, not because he was losing control but because he was calculating. "Still." The pressure kept building. Then it happened. A perfectly timed strike. The opponent stepped in and delivered a powerful blow straight to Bruce's upper body. This one didn't graze. It connected. Clean. Hard. Bruce staggered back a step. The crowd exploded. That was it. That was the moment they had been waiting for. Proof that this unknown fighter didn't belong here. For a brief second, everything slowed down. The noise faded. The lights blurred. And in that small window of silence, a memory surfaced. A fragile apartment. A weak man struggling to breathe. A mother trying not to break. A child watching everything in fear. 3 days. That was all they had. Bruce's jaw tightened slightly, not in pain, in resolve. The noise rushed back in. The opponent charged again, ready to finish it. But something was different now. Bruce didn't step back. He didn't retreat. He stood his ground. Just for a moment. Just long enough to feel the shift inside him. The referee's voice suddenly cut through the chaos. "Time!" The round was over, but the tension wasn't. Bruce walked back slowly, his expression unchanged. The crowd was louder than ever, convinced they had already seen how this would end. Across the cage, the opponent smiled confidently, rolling his shoulders as if the next round was just a formality. But Bruce was no longer just observing, no longer just defending. Because now it wasn't just about surviving. It was about finishing something he had already decided the moment he stepped into that cage he wasn't going to lose. The bell rang again. A sharp, piercing sound that cut through the noise and reset everything. For most fighters, the break between rounds was a moment to recover. For Bruce Lee, it was enough. He stepped forward from his corner, not rushed, not aggressive, just controlled. But something had changed. The same calm expression was still on his face. Yet now, it felt different. Not passive, not patient, focused. Across the cage, his opponent smirked, rolling his neck as if the outcome was already decided. "You lasted longer than I expected," he said, stepping forward. But this round he didn't finish the sentence. Because Bruce moved, not back, forward. Fast, too fast. A sharp step in, barely visible, and a precise strike snapped through the air. Crack. The sound wasn't loud, but it was clean, direct. The opponent froze for half a second, caught completely off guard. He hadn't even seen it coming. The crowd reacted instantly. Not with cheers, with confusion. What was that? Did he just hit him? Bruce didn't wait. Another movement, another strike, this time faster. A quick combination, controlled, efficient, no wasted motion. Each hit landed exactly where it needed to. No wild swings, no hesitation, just precision. The opponent stumbled back slightly, blinking as if trying to process what had just happened. This wasn't the same fighter from the first round. This wasn't someone reacting anymore. This was someone dictating. The giant shook his head and roared, charging forward with brute force. A heavy punch cut through the air, but Bruce wasn't there. He slipped past it, effortlessly. A counter came instantly, sharp, targeted. Then another, and another. The rhythm had changed, completely. The crowd felt it. The same voices that had been mocking just moments ago fell silent, because now they weren't watching a mismatch. They were watching something they didn't understand. Bruce's movements became fluid, almost unreadable. He wasn't just fighting, he was controlling space, timing, and distance all at once. Every step was perfectly placed. Every strike was calculated. The opponent tried to adjust, tried to predict, but there was nothing to predict. Every time he thought he had an opening, it disappeared. Every time he attacked, he was already too late. A sharp strike to the ribs, a quick snap to the jaw, a low kick that disrupted balance. The giant's confidence started to crack. His breathing grew heavier. His movements are slower. For the first time in a long time, he was reacting, not leading. Bruce stepped back for a split second, not out of pressure, out of control. His eyes locked onto his opponent, cold, focused, measured. The noise of the arena faded again, but this time it wasn't because of confusion. It was anticipation. Everyone could feel it. Something was coming. The opponent, now frustrated, gathered everything he had left and charged forward with full force, yet desperate. All in attack, meant to end the fight in one moment. A massive swing. Fast, powerful. Final. But Bruce didn't flinch. Didn't step back. Didn't hesitate. He stepped in. Right into the attack. And in that single instant, everything aligned. Timing. Distance. Precision. A blur of motion too fast for most to even register. A single, perfectly placed strike. Clean. Direct. Decisive. The impact echoed through the cage. The opponent's body froze. For just a second, then his legs gave out. The massive frame collapsed to the ground with a heavy thud. Silence. Complete silence. The crowd didn't react. They couldn't, because they hadn't fully processed what they had just seen. Bruce stood still, not celebrating, not reacting, just watching, making sure it was over. The referee hesitated for a fraction of a second, then rushed forward. But even before the count could begin, everyone already knew. This wasn't just a comeback. This wasn't luck. This was something else entirely. Something precise. Something controlled. Something inevitable. And in that moment, the entire arena realized the same thing at once. The fight had already been decided the second Bruce chose to stop holding back. The arena was frozen. The crowd stood in complete disbelief, their eyes locked on the cage where everything had just unfolded in a way no one had expected. Inside the cage, the giant lay motionless on the ground, out cold. The referee moved in quickly, checking for any sign of movement. Nothing. Then 1, 2, 3. But the count barely mattered anymore. Everyone already knew. This fight was over. The bell rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Finale. A sharp echoing sound that confirmed what had just happened. Silence held for a moment longer, as if the entire arena needed time to process reality, and then it exploded. Cheers erupted from every direction. Shouts. Screams. Applause. The crowd, once full of doubt and mockery, now roared with energy. They had just witnessed something they didn't fully understand, but couldn't ignore. A man who was expected to lose had completely changed the outcome. Bruce Lee stood in the center of the cage, but he didn't raise his hands, didn't smile, didn't acknowledge the crowd. There was no celebration in his eyes. Because for him, this was never about winning, it was about something else. The referee approached, holding up Bruce's hand, signaling victory. The crowd cheered even louder. But Bruce didn't react. His focus was already elsewhere. As the cage door opened, he stepped out slowly, ignoring the noise, ignoring the lights, ignoring the attention. Behind the scenes, someone handed him an envelope. Cash. The prize. He took it without hesitation, not for himself, but for someone else. Moments later, he was gone, back into the quiet streets, back toward that small apartment, back toward the family. When he arrived, everything felt different. The same broken walls, the same quiet air, but something had changed. The mother opened the door, and the moment she saw him, she understood. Bruce didn't say anything. He simply handed her the envelope. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Enough. More than enough. Her eyes filled with tears instantly. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. Bruce didn't respond. He just looked past her to the father, still lying on the bed, but now with something new in his eyes. Hope. The boy slowly stood up from the corner, taking small, careful steps forward, until he was standing in front of Bruce. He looked up, still, but grateful. Bruce knelt slightly, placing a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. No words, Just presence. A moment passed. Then Bruce stood back up, and without saying anything, he turned to leave. "Wait!" the mother called out. Bruce paused at the door. She hesitated, struggling to find the right words. Did you do all this?" Bruce stood still for a moment. The room was quiet. The answer wasn't complicated, but it wasn't something people said out loud. Finally, in a calm, steady voice, he spoke. "Some people fight for themselves." A pause. "And some people fight so others can live." Silence filled the room. Then Bruce walked out and disappeared into the night. No spotlight, no fama, no recognition. Just a man who stepped into a fight. Not for glory, but to save a family who had nothing left. And in the end, that was all that mattered.